Please welcome Tiffany Dufu to the stage.
This is my heartbeat song and I'm gonna play it. Been so long I forgot how to turn it up, all night long. All night long. This is my heartbeat song and my life's work is advancing women and girls. It's pretty much why I'm on the planet, so my life is very simple. I know what's on my tombstone, and I'm just kind of project managing my life backwards. Right now, I feel really lucky because I get to execute my purpose right here in this moment with all of you. It's the most rewarding thing that I do, speaking to women. It's the most exciting thing that I do. And some people find that hard to believe. I often get the question, but aren't you nervous? Aren't you scared standing up there? Apparently, someone did some interviewing of people, and public speaking is the greatest fear that Americans have. They fear public speaking more than they fear dying, which I think is incredible. My worst fear, because I've been using the same hair product for 20 years, is that Paul Mitchell will discontinue their foaming pomade. That's my worst fear. But I'll tell you, the reason why I don't find it actually scary at all to be up here is because I find over and over and over again that audiences are very generous. In fact, if you can imagine your experience right now, you're probably sitting there and you're probably hoping, even if it's not conscious, that I'm gonna do a really great job up here. Have you ever been in an audience and there's someone on the stage who's not doing a very good job? Yes. Don't you cringe? Doesn't it feel like almost like you're up there and you wish you could jump up there and give them a hug? Right? That's because we have a lot of respect and a lot of empathy as human beings for people who put themselves out there. Okay? It's really vulnerable to stand on a stage in front of a lot of people, and we can all relate to that. We all have a level of appreciation for that. So every time I'm on a stage, all I do is think about all of the positive energy that people are sending me, and I usually do pretty good because I'm usually getting a lot of positive energy, which I am right now. If at any time while I'm speaking, I see anyone, which is a little hard to see, doing a motion that looks something like this, I will not be offended. I will assume it means that I'm saying something that you think someone outside of this room might want to hear. And if that's the case, my Twitter handle is @tdufu, which is up here. And also you can tweet at Levo, that's my company. It's @Levo, Levo League. This is my mom, Brenda, and she found out that she was pregnant with me when she was 19 years old. My parents are from Watts, LA. Is anyone familiar with LA or Watts? Yeah, some people. So suffice it to say that during the mid-1970s, Watts was a rough place and it was a rough time. And my mom didn't know anything other than Watts, LA. But she knew when she found out that she was pregnant with me that she wanted something other than what she was experiencing at that time. She happened to have an uncle who was an Army recruiter, and she went to him and said, "This guy that's got me pregnant, I need him to join the Army." So between my mom, who's very convincing, trust me, and her big uncle, who was the Army recruiter, who was also very convincing, my dad did join the Army, and I was born 9 months later at Fort Lewis Army Base in Tacoma, Washington. My parents broke a very vicious cycle of poverty, of addiction, of violence in one generation based off of that move. And based off of a fundamental truth, which is a lesson that I take with me all the time, which is that if you want something that you've never had before, you're gonna have to do something that you've never done before in order to get it. It means that you're gonna have to take some kind of risk. And that's what my parents did over and over and over again. I was talking to my dad when I was pregnant with my second child, and I was having one of those sentimental, preggy moments where I was asking my dad, what did he hope for me when mom was pregnant with me? Because I was sharing with him what I hoped for this child that I was carrying. And my dad got really, really quiet at that time. And I almost wanted to retract the question. And he said, no, it's okay. He says, it's just that I'm a little bit embarrassed of my answer to the question. And I said, Daddy, how could you possibly be embarrassed of what you wanted for me when mom was pregnant with me?
And he said, well, you know, baby, to tell you the truth, when your mom was pregnant with you, he said, what I most hoped for was that you would graduate from high school and not get pregnant. He said, at the time that your mom was pregnant with you, I didn't even know that women like you existed. He said, I just hoped. Okay? So it is possible to realize a vision, to realize a dream, to manifest something much bigger than what you can even imagine in your mind right now. And that's the second lesson that my parents taught me. The third was that to whom much is given, much is required. Hopefully all of you have heard of that phrase, but I really believe that. And years ago, when I took over an organization called the White House Project, I took over from a woman who had founded the White House Project. Her name was Marie Wilson, and she built the Ms. Foundation for Women. She started Take Our Daughters to Work Day. She's someone who really is a pioneer in advancing women and girls. And a journalist asked me, Tiffany, what's the biggest difference between you and Marie Wilson? Well, my first mind went to demographics. Marie and I are quite different. She was in her mid-70s at the time. I was from the Pacific Northwest. She was from right here in Georgia. She was white, I was black. We had a lot of things that were different about us. But I eventually thought about it and I said, you know, the greatest difference between me and Marie Wilson is that I have far more responsibility to advance women and girls than Marie Wilson ever did. And that's because Marie Wilson spent a lot of time and a lot of sweat working toward the advancement of women and girls. And because she did that, I now today, as a woman, have many more choices. Lots of choices in some ways that Marie Wilson didn't have when she was coming up, like the choice to be able to tell my husband how many kids we're gonna have. Right? You laugh, he's like, well, how about, I'm like, no, how about not? And that's really the end of the conversation. And we laugh, but that's actually an enormous amount of power, and it's not the kind of power that many women around the world have, and that certainly even here, that not so long ago, many women didn't have. But whenever you have choices, you have power. Whenever you have power, you have more privilege, and when you have more privilege, guess what? You have a greater responsibility to give back. So those are some of the lessons that I take with me in my world and in my journey of advancing women and girls. Every professional job that I've had has somehow been connected to advancing women and girls. I moved to Seattle after I grew up in Tacoma. I went to the University of Washington, and I helped to start a really amazing place called Seattle Girls School. It's a middle school that focuses on math, science, and technology. I wish there were Seattle Girls Schools all over the planet, but this is where I got my start. I then went to Simmons College, as Madison said, and if you don't know about Simmons, it's a women's college in Boston. I ran the White House Project, which is a women's leadership organization. We trained women to run for office. And then I joined Levo, which is a destination for millennial women to help them elevate their careers. And we have local Levo chapters all around the world. And our local Levo leader, Jacqueline, is sitting right here. So make sure that you connect with her if you're interested in a resource to advance your career. She's absolutely phenomenal. I'm also on the launch team for Lean In. Many of you may not know about Levo. The most important thing to know about Levo is that when Warren Buffett decided he wanted to reach the next generation of leaders and he wanted to enter the digital age, he did two things. He started a Twitter account and he joined Levo. And so instead of me talking a little bit about Levo, I'm just going to show you very quickly how Levo League works. This will take not even a minute.
Meet Kelly. Like many other young professionals, Kelly has high aspirations,
I want to make upper management someday.
but she still doesn't know how to get there.
I'm kind of stressing out.
Don't stress, Kelly, because Alana
Who? I work like 2 desks away from you.
is about to hook you up with the Levo League.
Here, scoot over. If you want to move up in the world, you have to connect with other Gen Yers like me and find mentors to help you figure things out.
Kelly can tune in to office hours when influential businesswomen like Sheryl Sandberg present. And she can sign up for local Levo events. Kelly can network while she sweats it out. How's that burn feel, Kelly?
Love it.
Levo love it. Dying for pointed advice about getting that raise, Kelly can field questions to mentors like Jennifer directly.
If you're going to ask for a raise, make sure you go in prepared with a number. An increase of 5 to 10% is typical.
When she's ready to ask for that promotion, Kelly has the advice and support to make it happen. Kelly's future is looking brighter. Nice work, Kelly.
Sometimes people ask me, well, why are you so addicted and so committed to advancing women and girls? And I usually tell people about this story. When I was growing up, my dad used to have all of these conspiracy theories about how there was this small group of elite people that ran the world. And I would be really embarrassed when my friends would come over and he would warn them about these people and tell us to look out for them. And I used to think that my dad was crazy. Then as I grew up and I started getting more involved in a professional world and I started reading the newspaper and keeping track of current world events, I realized that, my dad isn't that crazy. There actually is a very small group of people at the highest levels of our government, at the highest levels of corporations, of NGOs, of institutions, that sit around really big marble and wood tables, and they make decisions that impact every single one of us. And while there are a few exceptions, that group of people is largely male, it's largely white, it's largely affluent, it's largely straight, it's largely able-bodied. And I really believe that since we know how important diversity is to solving really big problems, how important it is for us to have a diverse group of people sitting around the table with different perspectives in order to create new outcomes and new solutions, that the biggest crisis we face is a crisis of leadership. Because no matter what's important to you, whether it's healthcare, whether it's economy, whether it's education, if there aren't diverse groups of people sitting around the table trying to solve these problems, then we're just going to end up with the same solutions. And it's part of the reason why I think that women need to be sitting at those tables. Why women? Well, we're half of that population, so why not start there? So when it comes to women's leadership, there's actually a lot of really great news, and many of you are familiar with this. Women are actually graduating from college in higher number than men as of a couple of years ago. And we are participating in the workforce in roughly equal numbers. So we don't have a pipeline issue the way that we used to. Women can go to college, we can major in pretty much whatever we want, we can excel. And in some industries and in some areas, we're going into professional schools at higher rates than men, including law school, for example. So we don't have a pipeline issue, but we still have some issues, particularly when we look at the highest levels of leadership. For example, in government, right? Globally, women make up just 22% of all national parliaments. And I use this global number because in the US, it's even lower, it's only 17%. In fact, the US ranks 81st now in the world for women's political leadership. And I'm always reminded whenever I go someplace else and people are saying, why doesn't the US come and help our women start a White House project, that they should probably come here and help us figure out what's going on here. Last week I was in Iceland. In Iceland, 45% of their parliament is filled with women. And Iceland is ranked by the World Economic Forum as the #1 place to live if you are a woman, because of the access that you have to pretty much everything. And part of that was driven by the solidarity of women themselves. In 1975, 90% of women in Iceland went on strike, no matter what you did. If you were a stay-at-home mom, if you had a professional job, in the morning you went on strike. And obviously that put the nation at a standstill. And the first thing that the women demanded was their own political party. So fast forward to today, and these women are #1 in the world. I feel like I should make a t-shirt that I could wear on a really bad day that says, screw it, I'm moving to Iceland. But until then, I'm gonna stay here with all of you. Sometimes people ask me, well, what are the barriers? Why don't we have women at the highest levels of leadership? And there are lots, too many to go into in just a very brief period of time, but some of them include culture. So even though we consider ourselves very progressive and very modern, we actually have kind of old school notions when it comes to what women should be doing. In fact, we largely culturally perceive that women's primary role is as wife and mother. And sometimes people cringe at that and they say, oh, no, that's not true. But if you've ever been a visibly pregnant woman and had someone ask you, are you gonna stay at home when the baby arrives, when your male partner never ever gets that question, you're keenly aware of this cultural nuance of where women are supposed to be. There's obviously this discrimination, there's lack of economic power, and these are reasons why we still don't have as many women in the highest levels of leadership. We're only 3.4% of global 500 CEOs. But what I really want to focus on in the next few minutes that I have with you is some of the internal barriers and some of the things that I've learned about what it takes to really be successful advancing your leadership. So because I've been doing this for a while and I'm really obsessed with it, I've done a lot of coaching and teaching, but a few years ago, I really wanted to focus on the women who I had met and who in our programming were really successful advancing their leadership. And I decided that we would spend some time with them. We called them our superstars, our leadership superstars. And I wanted to really get a sense of what is it that makes them so successful? Why are they superstars? And I developed what I call the success equation for advancing your leadership. And I want to talk just a little bit about what these women exhibited through their mindset, through their abilities, through their behaviors that made them really successful getting where they wanted to go. And the first part of the success equation was all around leadership assets. And they're really important. The first one is what I call self-viability. This is my son, Kofi. He's 9 years old, and not that long ago, Kofi walked up to me, he looked me dead in my face, and he said to me, Mom, I can run faster than you. And I said, Kofi, you can't run faster than me. I said, my legs are longer than yours, I've been running a lot longer than you have. I said, honey, if we went outside and raced right now, I would beat you. And do you know what Kofi said to me? Let's go outside. Let's go outside right now. And it was such an insight for me because I thought, wow, in the face of cold, hard facts and a very compelling argument as to why he would not win the race, he was very game to go out there and to try. Not only that, his perception of his abilities were so far ahead of where I knew his abilities to actually be. And it's really cute now, we hear that story and we think, oh, that's so adorable. But I want you to fast forward 30 years from now, okay? Kofi will be the man who's at a company and he sees a job posting. It's a job that he wants. And that job has 10 qualifications that it lists, that it says you need to have in order for you to be qualified to do this job. Now, I want you to think back to Kofi right now today. Based on where he is today, how many of those qualifications do you think Kofi will feel that he needs to have in order for him to apply for this job? 2 maybe. My Kofi will have 2 out of the 10, and he will say, oh, this job's mine. It's totally mine. My daughter, on the other hand, who is 6 right now, 30 years from now, she's gonna see that same job posting. It's gonna have 10 qualifications. My daughter, Akua, is gonna have 8. She'll have 8 out of the 10 qualifications, and you know what she's gonna do? She's gonna call me, and she's gonna say, oh, mommy, I saw this really great opportunity. It's this job, but there's 10 qualifications, and I only have 8 of them. What am I gonna do to get the other 2? Maybe I should have gone to business school. Maybe I need to get some. Do you know someone who maybe, she would be obsessing over the 2 things that she doesn't have that would inhibit her from actually going for it. Self-viability is the belief that you're qualified, that you can do it. We use the word viable because in politics, viability is an assumption, a presumption that that person is a winner, right? That they have what it takes. And so much of your leadership success and advancement is about being self-viable. Madison and I were talking in the back, and she was saying how this is a really special group of women, a really special group of young women, because many of you have played organized sports, which, by the way, is one of the 3 things that women who are at the highest levels of leadership have done. The other 2 are going to girls' schools and being a Girl Scout. So if you want to guarantee that your daughter will be set up for success, have her do all 3 of those things. But she talked about the determination, the will to win, and I'm telling you that sets you up very well in the context of self-viability. The second asset is what we call political savvy. This is a Mr. Yuck sticker. Is anybody familiar with this sticker, has seen this sticker before? Maybe a few people. So I'm from the Pacific Northwest, and when I was growing up, there was a public health campaign to encourage kids to stay safe and to stay away from household cleaning products, medications. And they doled these stickers out at schools, at community centers, and parents were encouraged to put the stickers on these items in your home and to teach your children, do not touch anything with the Mr. Yuck sticker on it. Now, of course, whoever created this campaign obviously didn't have kids, because if I put this bright green sticker on anything, my son would be all over it. But the whole point is that women often think of politics as something that's very yucky. They think of it as something that's separate from just the way that the world operates. And what we found was that women who were very successful in advancing their leadership did not have this aversion to politics. In fact, they thought that it was a very natural part of just the way that the world worked. They would say things like, oh, my friends, I think that politics is yucky, they don't want to get their hands dirty, but I don't think they understand that if they're a member of a family, they've been playing politics their entire life. Okay? Politics is just understanding that every environment that you're in is an ecosystem. And in order for you to be effective, the decisions that you make in the ecosystem are really important. They're important in relationship to you, and they're important in relationships to others, right? So for example, in this room right now, I have very clear view of the people who were in these first 4 or 5 rows. And I'm conscious of the people who are in the first 4 or 5 rows. And every once in a while, except for this guy right here who hasn't smiled the whole time that I've been up here, there he goes, right? I'm looking for the people who are smiling, right, and who are feeding me positive energy. And I'm gonna remember the people who are sitting right here if they come up to me afterward, which I hope that some people do. Right? And if you're ever in a room and you want to commit to being seen in the room, one of the most visible places that you can sit is in the first 3 or 4 or 5 rows, where whoever's standing on the stage is going to be right, they're going to be right in your line, in their line of sight. Okay? So that's a political move. We don't think of it that way. Maybe you just sat there because somebody told you to sit down in the front and you were like, okay, I'm going to do it. But all of those things really matter. The other asset that I want to talk about is storytelling. The women who were very successful advancing their leadership, I found incredibly compelling in being able to share what matters most to them and how that impacts where they've been and where they're going. If they were able to then tack on an ask, a very clear ask, then that became what you would call an elevator pitch, and they were ready to go. But I found it really impressive that they understood that they were essentially the coach of their leadership journey, and it was very important to be able to bring people along, and they were very effective storytellers. So the first part of that success equation has to do with particular leadership assets, and those are some of them. The second part of the success equation is about ambition. And I don't have time to spend a lot of time on ambition. My favorite definition of ambition is in a book called Necessary Dreams by Anna Fels, F-E-L-S. Please go get that book and read that book. That will give you a much better, much more deep dive into ambition. And she defines ambition as a desire to achieve mastery of your craft, to be really good at something, which women are very good at doing, combined with a desire to receive public recognition for it, which is where we get kind of ambivalent about ambition, because women aren't socialized to want to get all of the credit for something. But yet, ambition is a combination of both. What we found in our research was that for the purpose of advancing your leadership, all ambition meant was that you were very clear about your next step. Okay? And it didn't mean that your next step had to be, I'm going to be a senator or I'm going to be the CEO. The next step could be something very simple, like, you know, I really think I need a seat on that committee. Or I really think I need to have lunch with this specific person or this kind of person to ask them the questions that I need to ask to figure out my next step. Or maybe my next step is to get this particular job or this particular project or assignment. But I think what's important is that the clarity around the next step becomes important, because anytime you get in front of someone, it's important to have something to ask them. I can't say no to women who reach out to me. And so what that means is that for the past several years, every Tuesday and Thursday, I have coffees and lunches. I have 4 of them a week. On a week where I really can, I try to have 6 of them. I'll have 3 on Tuesday and 3 on Thursday. So I spend a lot of time talking to women who have great ideas about how to change the world and who are trying to get advice and are trying to connect with me in the process of doing that. Out of all of those women that I've met and that I connect with, I could count on my hands the number that had a very clear ask for me. Okay? Very, very rare. People want to reach out, but they very rarely ask you for something. And it's interesting because when I'm connecting with someone, I'm always listening for the ask. I'm always listening for how I can help because I love helping and I want to help. And because if you can imagine, if I'm connecting with either 4 or 6 women a week, and I met you in October of 2013 on the second Thursday, I can't remember who that person was. So the ask is really important. It's really important to capture people's imagination when you have it. The third part of the success equation is around access, specifically access to people. So the women who were very successful in advancing their leadership understood that their leadership journey was a team sport. It was not a solo endeavor. They didn't believe that if they just worked hard and they just produced really great results, that was going to be the be-all and end-all and they were going to be successful. They knew that they needed other people in their corner and that they needed other people on their team. Right now, I'm standing in front of you today as someone who is just simply the cumulative investment of a lot of people. And I'm showing you images of some of those people because they're very important to me. They're people who have given me opportunities. They're people who have opened doors for me. Literally, I have just been handed off from one person to the next. When I was in Seattle and I moved to Boston, somebody said, oh, when you get there, go find this person, tell them that I sent you. When I moved from Boston and I went to New York, someone said, go find Marie Wilson at the White House Project and tell her that I sent you. Marie is right next to me in this picture, by the way, and that's Gloria Steinem, who's awesome, and Janice Rills-Ellig and Davia Temin. And this is Deval Patrick, the former governor of Massachusetts, who has been such an important role model and I'm very inspired by. And these are 2 other folks, Gina Davis and Susan Taylor, who to me is still Essence Magazine, who have also been people who have invested in me. People talk about mentors and sponsors. Both are incredibly important in advancing your leadership. And by the way, mentors are people who primary value is in what they say to you when you're in the room with them. So those are people that you want to go to for advice and for insight and for guidance. And what's really great is when you can establish a relationship with people over a long period of time, because then they can really mirror back yourself to yourself, right? And they can say, remember 2 years ago when we were having the same conversation? And you could say, oh, okay. They really help you grow and develop. The primary value of a sponsor is in what they say to you when you're not in the room. So those are people who are really expending their political, their economic, their social capital on you. And in some cases might be laying their body down on the table in order to ensure that you get the next step. So those big marble tables, those big wood tables, a lot of the conversations that happen around those tables are very intentional conversations about who's going to get the promotion, about who's going to get ahead, about who's going to get the opportunity. Yes, people are talking about you, right? And you want someone talking about you. You want to know when those conversations are happening, and you want to know who can vouch for you and who can really sponsor you. One of the things that we've been trying to do at Levo is provide more access to people who can help us to achieve clarity about our leadership journeys and access to more people who can really give us the insight that we need to be successful. And so I want to share with you just one resource that you have if you happen to be a person who wants to know, how can I get into, how can I learn, how can I get exposure to these amazing people? And it's basically how Levo does mentorship. Have you ever thought, what exactly is a mentor, and where am I supposed to find these amazing people? Mentors are one part of the success equation, and Levo is here to help. Levo mentors have experience and insight from overcoming their own professional challenges, and a passion for sharing their stories with you to help you elevate your career. Usually, the first step to getting a mentor is exchanging advice and building rapport. So we're thrilled to introduce a new feature called Ask a Question. Connect with the Levo mentor by clicking follow under their name and image. Request advice by typing your question into the Ask box. You're welcome to make your question private, but we encourage you to keep it public because a mentor's answer to your question just might spark an aha moment for another member. Not ready to ask your own question? Just follow others, and you'll still get great advice. You're a part of Levo. We're all here to help each other. Just ask. And don't keep us to yourself. Share this video, invite others to join, and feel the Levo love. So this is your homework. I want you to think about this is the success equation, by the way, if you weren't taking notes, but maybe we can get this to you. It's basically your assets, so developing the mindset, behaviors, and abilities required for your success. Ambition, just think knowing what your next step is, even if it's a small step. So when you get access to people, which is the third part of the success equation, you can ask them for what you need, and that's the success equation for elevating your leadership. Your homework, though, is connected to the insight that I learned from my parents, which is that if you want something you've never had before, you'll have to do something that you've never done before in order to get it. And I want you to think about whether it's today, whether it's tomorrow, whether it's next week, one thing that you've never done before in order to advance your leadership, and one thing that you've never done before in order to advance the leadership of another woman that you know, and I want you to do that. I want you to do that, because if you do that, then you will be helping me in my life's work of advancing women and girls. I want to thank you for your time, and I left a little bit of time on the clock, even though it was really hard for me because I'm a preacher's kid and I had many more things to say, so that we could have a conversation for those of you who are interested. And I understand that you can go onto the app and you can ask questions there, but I think Madison is going to come up. Look, she's prepared.
I'm back. I just kind of like appear out of nowhere. We do have a very phenomenal question here for you. How do you practice forward thinking and being confident in your abilities without being perceived as cocky or too aggressive? I'm just going to make my way to the podium while you.
Yes. So the simplest answer to that question is that you might be perceived as cocky or too aggressive. And I would encourage you to get comfortable with other people thinking that you might be cocky or too aggressive, in part because you can't necessarily control what other people are.
I know, I was thinking the same thing, but I was going to let her finish. I was like, preach! Get comfortable with it.
Yeah, I think you should. And the reason why is because it is very difficult. It is a very fine line, particularly for women, to walk between being overly assertive and being authoritative in a very credible way. They have, there's this research that the Center for Talent Innovation does that I encourage all of you to look at. It's about executive presence, and it talks about this fine line. But I really believe that more often than not, when you're genuine and when you're authentic, there will be more people who recognize what you have to bring to the table and will give you opportunity than the few people who will say, oh my God, she's such the word that I don't even say anymore. So that's the advice that I have, because I think more often than not, we get really caught up in trying to address that, and it's really, really hard.
Here's another great question. What do you think about the wage gap between, between men and women in the workforce?
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, there's a wage gap in this country. Women earn 70 cents for every dollar that a man earns. This is across industry, and a lot of research has been done as to why exactly that is, and even accounting for women stepping out of the workforce, for example, to have children. It is just simply plain and true a gender gap. And part of it happens because in most organizations, there's not transparency around what people make, except for the people who are at the very top. That often has to be reported publicly. One of the things that we really focus on at Levo is around making sure that young women professionals are prepared to do what we call asking for more. So we really focus on the negotiation part of the process. I have hired many people in my career, many people. And I will tell you that every man that I make a job offer to negotiates. He always comes back to me and asks me for more money than I offer him. I have to be honest, and I have to share with you that very few women ever come back to me and ask me for more money than what I initially offered them. It's happened, I can count on one hand the number of times that it's happened. Now, I am a very perceptive, responsible, knowledgeable woman when it comes to these issues. So what that means is that I tend to offer women more, because I know that women are not going to come back to me and they're not going to ask me more. But not everyone is like that, not everyone is conscious. And so I think it's really important that you know, first and foremost, never, ever, ever say yes to a job offer after the first round, right? You should always come back and you should always ask for more. But the wage gap absolutely exists. I don't like it. That's how I feel about it.
And now, as a parent and as a wife, this is a very unique question. How do you help your children understand the value of failure? Because it's a different day and a different time. So many parents bring their kids up telling them they're great, and then they get out in the real world and someone tells you that you're not. You don't know how to handle that. So how do you do that as a parent for your children?
Yeah, there's a really great book by a woman named Carol Dweck. She does a lot of work on psychologists and sociologists. The book is called Mindsets, and I encourage all of you to get this book. And in the book, she talks about the difference between people who have a growth mindset, which means that it's someone who believes that if you try, that you can get better and that you can be successful through your effort and through what you put into something, kind of like somebody that I know on the stage. Okay? Oh. A limited mindset or a closed mindset means that you believe that we all have innate abilities and innate talents, and that all we're really doing in life is tapping into our innate abilities and our innate talents, which can be a great thing. It's not a bad thing to think. It's just that if you believe that it's all innate and that either you have it or you don't, then you're not incentivized to try harder. So we are a growth mindset family. We have growth mindset values in my home. The most important thing that I do as a mom is to engage my kids in meaningful conversations about things in life. And I'm always focused on achievement in the context of trying, right? Did you try? Why are you good? My son is very, very good at math. And I always ask him when he reminds me how good he is at math. I say, why are you good at math? And he says, because I do a lot of math. I said, that's exactly right. And you remember that, right? It's not just because you're smart. It's because you do a lot of math, you practice a lot of math, and that's how you go. So that's how I work on that, is it's really about you trying. But I have to say, I live in Harlem in New York, and we have what's called the Harlem Cycling Classic. And they do these kiddie races in the beginning. And both of my kids raced. And they give medals to all of the kids after they race, which I completely understand why they do that. Well, my son, who, as you have probably understood, is quite competitive. And so when he clearly did not win the race, he was very upset. And he came to me on Sunday, and he was just like, in tears in his eyes coming, and he was saying, I didn't win the race. And before I could get to him, one of our neighbors kind of swooped in and said, it's okay, son, you won, you're a winner. Everybody got a medal, like everybody won the race. And I wanted to say, no, actually, he didn't win the race. He lost, he was like 20th in the race. And what I would say is, yes, you lost, but guess what? Next year, you can get out there and practice. We can go around in the morning. You can work hard, and maybe you can win. Maybe you can do better. But I think it's important to allow our kids to fail and to experience the failure. Because if we don't get enough practice failing, especially failing publicly, then we're too afraid of it and we're fearful of it.
Well, thank you so much, Tiffany. We really appreciate it. And I love that. If you don't get practice failing publicly, then you're afraid of it. Thank you so much. Thank you. Give her a round of applause. All righty, we're going to move on to our next panel. Don't forget to go into the app and submit your questions. There's never a bad question. So submit.